welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's episode, we are going to talk about well-architected and how you can run those at your own company. If you want to know more about serverless, cloud computing, or software engineer practices in general, subscribe to my channel in the red button below. I post videos on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, so let's get started. This is another episode in the series. This is not a podcast, and today we have a very special guest, Rolf Koski. He has been doing and reviewing a lot of different applications for his customers using the well-architected review, and he will share everything he knows about what is this well-architected tool, framework, whatever you like to call it, and how you can run those in your own companies or in your own projects using the experience that he has by doing this for many years. So let's go to the interview. Hello and welcome. Today we have an amazing guest. He's an AWS Community Hero, the AWS user group lead for Helsinki, and also he helps a lot in the Nordics to other user groups. He's the CTO at Cybercom, AWS Business Group, and he's also an Apn Ambassador. I never have said that word. So welcome, Rolf. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm super happy that you're here. We have been working together even before I joined AWS, so it's a pleasure to have you here and talking to you today.
Yeah, we go way back with Marcia. She used to be one of the user group leaders with me in Finland as well, so I know her before her amazing career in AWS.
Yeah, so it's super nice to have you here. But my first question is, what is an Apn Ambassador?
It is a program which AWS runs for partner organizations. So it is a very select group of individuals who are helping promoting AWS services and the best practices, how to use them. It is a global community. I think that we are somewhere in the north of 100 members right now all over the world, and very talented professionals. You actually need to hold several certifications in order to be accepted to the program, and also you needed to kind of proven yourself in a line of duty that you are the kind of person that is suitable for the program. But yeah, that is partner organizations only, but it has been a great opportunity for me personally, at least, to meet a lot of very talented people who I would not have probably the pleasure to interact or meet otherwise. It is kind of some of the people in that community could be described in certain circumstances as competitors, but there we kind of are gathered around the single subject of being the kind of awesome group who we are.
Yeah, I know that you have been part of that group for even longer than being a hero, so it's like a double recognition. So.
It was. I was inducted in the program actually when it was still in the beta phase, so kind of not the very first ones, but like very quickly after the program was created, I was inducted to the program. So yeah, I was ambassador way before that. I was invited to the Heroes program.
Yeah, but that's super cool. So can you tell us a little bit about Cybercom, what you do there? You're a CTO, that's an amazing title. So tell us everything about it.
Yeah. Well, Cybercom is a Nordic consultancy. We are one of the very few premier partners of AWS working in the Nordics. We concentrate on the consultancy business and also managed services. So those are probably our two fortes. That's what we are doing. We are like 1,200 people across the Nordics. Main office in Stockholm. biggest offices in Sweden, but I work in Finland. So here we have a few hundred specialists working in several cloud technologies and advisory and consultancy and what have you.
You're based in Tampere, not even in
Yeah,
Helsinki.
I'm living in Tampere, and yeah, my kind of work desk where I'm actually speaking right now is in Tampere, but my role in this Cybercom AWS business group is actually Nordic wide, so I interact with customers wherever Cybercom has those, so it is not tied to my work desk. Even though nowadays it seems that everyone is more or less tied to their own locality and not able to travel, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think your kids are very happy to have your night sleeping at home. So
yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things I know you do a lot in your role and in Cybercom is the well-architected framework reviews, and that's what we are going to talk today. I never talk about the well-architected framework at all in my channel and the reviews, so why we don't start from explaining a little bit what is this reviews, what is this framework, and we can start from there.
Okay, so the well-architected or being well-architected is, I very often like to describe it as kind of twofold thing. And the other part is kind of the well-architected framework, the guidance itself, that how to implement best practices on top of AWS. And then on the other hand, it is the well-architected review, which is a point-in-time assessment that if you are indeed well-architected and if you have been following the guidelines and best practices. And when I do these reviews, it is generally for workloads and implementations where I have not been the part of the team that has been implementing it. Sometimes it might be that it was implemented by Cybercom team, but not nearly always. This is actually also a thing that I very often tend to do to kind of new customers or like customers that are not previously engaged with us in any way. So kind of the first step towards possible customership in the future. So giving a second opinion and extra pair of eyes to take a look at the implementation and being very well positioned in like giving out impartial comments and guidance that where the things should be taken to next. And maybe one of the most important aspects of conducting a well-architected review is that it is always a conversation. So I don't feel that I'm entitled to go and like bash someone else's implementation. So I always try to understand the background, understand the realities which have been involving when doing the implementation. There is always room to improve. I have not ever seen a workload that would be kind of picture perfect. And sometimes there are oversights, sometimes there are reasons why certain things were done in a certain way, and you always need to put those into context, that what is what is important and what is less important when suggesting that customers like enhance something or change something. So it is also being well architected is a bit of a trade-off game, but it is also being informed that it's far less dangerous to make something that you know that is unoptimal when you know that there was a reason and you kind of made your best to ensure that the unoptimal implementation was as good as the situation enables it to be.
When you take technical depth and you know about it, it's not just because you're just don't know anything and just click around and do bad decisions because you are not informed. But sometimes you need to take that technical depth. I don't know how it's called in the well-architected framework, but because you need to move faster or you need to deliver or you have a lot of constraints that are coming from the outside that makes you do those things. So I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, that is very, very important indeed. And that it is also kind of important that the dialogue is kept in a way that customer always feels that they are respected and not attacked by
You're
someone who
not
thinks
coming with a
this is
checklist and telling you,
yeah,
oh, you have open public bucket. Now you
yeah,
don't have, you have only administrative IAM role. Bad,
yeah,
bad, bad, bad.
yeah, yeah. And this is like actually like how there is a tool involved in the process called well-architected tool, which actually everyone can find inside their own AWS accounts, and that is actually pretty much structured as a checkbox list. But at least like my personal way of conducting well-architected review is not ever to show that checklist to customer, because I think that sets the tone too much.
Exactly.
That this is actually an audit. And one of the things that we always say to the customers, that this is not an audit, this is an informed discussion, that we want to understand that where we are and make like a rational decisions moving forward. So that is the key, I think.
Yeah, and I think we will talk a little bit more later in the interview on how you go and do these reviews with your customers, how is the journey. But I think one thing I would like to go in is because the framework is organized in pillars, and these pillars are quite important, I will say, for analyzing your cloud workload. So maybe we can talk a little bit about them.
So I actually have this stupid mnemonic, or what is it? Mnemonic?
Yeah.
That's how you say it. Okay. Yeah. So I always think of Aws RPC. I think that only makes sense if you're an old data center guy and you know what a remote procedure call is. But that's how I like memorized that. Yeah. I honestly, in the beginning, I was struggling when I was explaining. I was struggling to remember that what are the pillars, and then you start laying them out, and when you're at 3 or 4, you start to try to remember what were the other 2, and then you can like kind of get a little bit lost in your own thoughts.
Yeah.
So I had this.
I can tell you, at least operation and excellence and security are the 2 main pillars in AWS. Those are what AWS is founded. What everything we do with those 2 pillars in mind. Those are like the guiding lines of AWS. So it's nice to see that those are the 2 first pillars in the framework, because
yeah, and it is. So the explanation of the pillars are somewhat self-explanatory from the titles as well, but there are certain things that I always try to explain to customers, that how these are focused. So operational excellence is actually mostly about people and ways of working, rather than actual implementation or actual architectural choices. And it seems that is like also a area where people are kind of lagging in implementation kind of lot. I think I have usually the most findings in operational excellence, and the operational excellence also has a lot of gravity inside the well-architected framework. And because of that, this is actually the order that 99% of the times I go through the framework in this specific order. And some of the pillars do have like a certain overlap of sorts. So especially when speaking with the customer about their architecture. Sure. So actually, maybe one step back before like diving deeper to the pillars is that when the kind of the review starts, the first part always is that the customer explains the architecture, not only about like from technological perspective, but also from business perspective, that what this workload is, what is its intended use and users, and the business significance, what will happen if this is down for 1 hour or 12 hours or something like that. So kind of setting the scene that what type of workload are we talking about? Is it like something that handles millions of dollars of revenues following through it, or is it simply just some informational site intended for internal users? So this is very important to understand, so that when giving out advice, you are like aligning the advice correctly, so that you are not, like we say in Finland, that you are not shooting flies with a cannon. So that's it is important to always understand the context. Regardless, the framework can be utilized from small workloads to like hugely distributed large enterprise workloads. It makes no difference, but you need to understand that the context, being able to apply it correctly. But back to the pillars. So usually the discussion of the operational excellence actually takes the most time, even if these should be like balanced or even evened out across the different pillars. But it kind of naturally starts in a way that when you're discussing operational excellence and you are starting to touching different subjects, it actually leads you to discuss also the answers that you can like then, so to speak, tick off later when you are like checking, for example, performance. So
can you give some examples of things that you will check when you're talking about operational excellence?
Yeah, for sure. So it is, as said, that it has a lot of gravity in like on how people work and how the processes are laid out. So
I don't know, CI/CD automatization or things like that will fall in those categories?
Yeah, that is like an example of like the more technological sides of what can be discussed there. But it is also like that, do you have documentation? Do you have run books? That if you, how do you like manage like incident response? That do you use like a Slack channel or Teams channel to ingest the incident feeds or event feeds? And do you have like radiator panels or operational displays somewhere in your like operational war rooms or something like that? So it can be like vary a lot, but it also depending on the company and the workload, I think that this is kind of how would I say, like a pyramid of sorts, so that it makes no sense in like discussing the tip of the pyramid, that if you've done some fancy integration to auto-remediate some issues, if your underlying structure is still like not there, basically. So this is also important to keep in mind that the bedrock needs to be there first, and then you can start building on top of that bedrock. And well-architected review is first and foremost, it is also a time-boxed effort. So when I do it, I generally use few hours. This is done during one day.
Wow.
In most cases, but what I do it, I spend few hours on a previous day or during a few previous days to go through the possible documentation that has been delivered to me, and usually in most cases we do it in a way also that I'm granted a read-only access to the AWS accounts. So I do have the possibility, in most, not all, but most cases, I do have the possibility to go in and take an independent look at how things are set up. And like I do have like a personal checklist of certain things that I tend to kind of make mental notes, like how IAM credentials are set up, if there is a federation, if there are any public S3 buckets or anything like that. Not necessarily to point out that they are flawed in implementation, but rather to like ask an informed question while doing the review. So that happens like during previous days to the review. And the review is then the latest ones I ran. It has been roughly 6.5 hours of wall clock time.
So a full day.
So full day, and that is more or less like 5 to 5.5 hours of actual working time.
And who comes there from the customer?
It depends also on how large the workload is. So if it's really small and not necessarily that significant to customers' business, then it might be like a developer and someone responsible for the service being operational, so service owner or someone in a similar role. And I think that the biggest one I did a while back, traveling to Norway, I think there was like 14 people joining the review, and that's especially when I'm like flying solo. So it's I do have like in certain, especially when I was doing this on site and face to face with the teams, then I used to at some points have someone external with me from Cybercom to kind of monitor the situation, making independent notes. But in most times I'm doing this by myself, so I'm the only one running the show. So you need to be like the facilitator and the specialist, specialist in the subject matter. So that can become a bit tedious at times, and especially now, the last 3-4 reviews that I've done have been in full remote mode. So like doing it across Teams, and I mean like Microsoft Teams. So it has been like the tool that we use it on that. So it becomes kind of tedious to manage large groups, so I've kind of set a mental bar of not having more than 8 external people joining on the review, so that I have some possibility on keeping tabs that which voice belongs to whom and what their role is in regards of the workload.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of people still. And
and like when you do not have like the physical presence of the people, it's a lot harder to read the room. Like when someone is speaking, like just seeing that how other people react to that response. Because I've been in situations where someone in customers who have like separate ops departments, that someone from a dev team starts answering to some detail, and you can like see the blank faces of the ops people that they didn't have any idea of like a requirement that the workload had. So this is actually one thing that I really much loved on the in-person reviews, that there was interaction, because there were people in the room that normally did not discuss with each other, even if they would have needed to.
That reminds me, the Phoenix project book that nobody talks to. And do you make them turn their cameras on nowadays, or?
Yes and no. So the kind of the broad statement is that I do notify everyone in advance nowadays that when you are introducing yourself, that you need to have your camera on, because that is also for me, because I need to be able to put a face to the voice. So otherwise I can't like compartmentalize mentally that who is saying what and what is happening here. So that helps me a great deal, that even like seeing their face for 2 minutes in the beginning, that is something that I kind of send out a requirement that this is what I expect you to do. And if someone has technical difficulties, then fine, it's not the end of the world, but that's how I would like to run this. But to be realistic, everyone on mobile 4G connections spread across the Nordics, like having a smooth experience for everyone, with everyone videos turned on, that might be still pushing it a little bit. So I made the concession of like saying that, okay, when you're just following and someone is sharing screen and walking through a diagram, fine, let's keep the cameras turned off. It's not a big of a deal. But in the beginning, I like to see everyone.
Yeah, it's nice to see and at least put a face. If not, then and I imagine most of those meetings are a bunch of men, so they all sound the same.
And it's like actually like a majority of the cases that I do are not currently in Finland for Finnish customers. So it is more or less everyone is like communicating in a language that is not a native language. So I've had like people also outside of like the normal Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden. I've had like people who are not otherwise like native speakers of any Nordic languages, so French people, German people, Belgian people,
mix of
because
everything.
Because we work in a global context, so some of our customers have like global suppliers who are not necessarily from Nordics at all. So it's not only about me not being able to that fluently speak Swedish. It's also about like being many people who are not conversing on the local language. So it is like the lingua franca of IT to speak English. So like almost all of the reviews that I do nowadays are in English. So that is, for some, it is an extra mile to go, and I've gotten so used to it because I do it so much. But like 10 years ago, it would still have been a bit more struggle than what it is today.
Yeah, maybe we can go back to the pillars because we only touched the first one and we need to have 4 more to talk about, and then we can continue with the review process because I want to know everything about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So as said, operational excellence, a lot more people, processes rather than technology. Security, it touches kind of both aspects, kind of the governance and the compliance side, and then kind of the technical security side as well. So it's not all about like checking security groups or that kind of stuff. It is also like understanding that what external requirements there are against your workload and making sure that you are abiding to the least privileges principles, for example, and so on.
Is it only like the well-architected pillar, like reviewing like the AWS side, or it's also looking at if there are other integration or compliances that might not be inside AWS? It's also part of the check-in? I don't know.
Yeah, that is actually an interesting question because this is not necessarily something that everyone knows, but the AWS well-architected framework is not necessarily only for workloads or components residing in AWS.
Okay.
So well-architected review is actually something that you can apply to, for example, a migration case where you have on-premises workload and you are planning on migrating that over to AWS and then checking that your plan is okay. So it's not necessarily even for workload that is existing at the moment. So and that specific note, it is also one case that you have not implemented a line of anything, and then you just want to validate your plan. That is this the way that we would want to implement this? And then you can do well-architected review, and you do not actually have an implementation yet.
Wow.
And on that note, one aspect also on the well-architected reviews, that where we started this whole talk, was that the other part is being well-architected, and the other part is like having a well-architected review. So kind of being on the journey of being well-architected actually means that it would make a lot of sense for anyone who makes one well-architected review to have that on even intervals. So maybe not every week, maybe not every month, but let's say like twice a year or once a year. Because as said, that this is a time-boxed effort, that we only have one day to go through everything. It would be silly to assume that we can find out I'm good, but I'm not that good. That I can just magically take a look at someone's AWS account and say like 200 different things that are wrong with this implementation. It doesn't work like that way. So it is and it should be an iterative approach. So the first review gives you understanding where you are, and we can just assume and trust that we have found out a set of probably the most important findings that there are to be found. It's not necessarily exhaustive. It doesn't necessarily include everything. We might even have missed something that is important. That's not the most important part. The thing is that if you remediate those issues and take action and be better versed in being well architected, then the next time when the review is done, then you have the possibility to find more issues, and then you can like verify that these that were found last time, that they were taken care of and they were fixed.
Yeah.
So this is why it makes sense to have an iterative approach.
Yeah, and I think it's like any test. You do it, it's for that particular time. So software is a live thing. So 6 years, 6 months, 1 year in advance. New things.
Yeah, and like where we started like being well architected, if you just do a well architected review and do not consider of being well architected, I don't know how much that makes sense. You need to have like the culture of like being compliant with the framework if you want to follow that framework.
So it's
otherwise
also a change in the culture in the organization, because if the first pillar is a process of persons and humans and systems, then maybe if you want to go in this well-architected road, then you need to maybe change the culture of your organization.
Yeah, for sure. And in many things, whether it's agile, DevOps, managed services, well architected, there's always like different pillars where this constitutes of. So naturally, technology is one, but like ways of working and culture are equally important. So if you only take one of these, for example, these three, it ends up in a kind of situation where you're not like enabling your organization to the fullest. So culture change is a major part.
Exactly. But sometimes when you think about AWS, you might only think about the technology. So this is maybe something new for a lot of people, that they need to think about their processes in a bigger way, not only having the coolest and shiniest technology.
Yeah, but this does not differ in any way. Like a few years back, we were still talking about like the transition to public cloud. And a big part of that transition was also culture change, that you needed to accept that you are moving away from server hugging world to accepting like more agile ways of consuming services. And that was like a major culture change for many companies. This culture change with well architected, this is maybe more on micro level, because this is more like on teams level, that how the teams adapt to being well architected and like reading those white papers and making good decisions on architecture. But on basic level, it doesn't kind of differ what is happening here.
Yeah, there is the third of the pillars is this reliability, and that, for example, remind me a chat I had with Adrian Hornsby. He's also based in Finland, about chaos engineering and things like that. It's also applying these type of things will help you to be well architected, or you don't need to apply like chaos engineering to be well architected.
It depends on the workload. So and it depends on the business requirements of the workload. So I really like Adrian's talks, and I think that it is an awesome approach. I have some familiarity with chaos engineering myself as well.
He talks mostly about culture change when he talks about chaos engineering. I made an interview like this one with him, and for me, I was all in the technological side, and when I start talking to him, he just debunked it, like, no. Chaos engineering is all about people, it's all about process, it's all about culture change. And I was like, okay.
I think this is similar what is here, the situation with well architected. And like in regards of chaos engineering, that what I already mentioned, that is it makes sense to put things into perspective. That if you are running a static website on S3 and just using CloudFront in front of that, what's the role of chaos engineering in that? There's not much room that what you can do, because you are relying on kind of the backend services to do their work. And on the other hand, that if you have like a super complex enterprise workload that has really strict requirements that this needs to be up and running like on seconds scale rather than minutes or hours, then you don't basically have any other opportunity but to automate all the remediations and how to make sure that the automation works as intended. That's where the chaos engineering comes into play. So you can like have a managed way of testing that what if something goes wrong, that the whole system is able to cope or like incrementally back off, for API latencies or something like that. So it is kind of the chaos engineering is very well conceptualized package of many aspects that what are also underlying in the being well architected.
Yeah, at least when you are talking about these pillars, it just rang the bell about that conversation I have with Adrian, that it was not only about technology. There is so many other aspects about it. And then the last two pillars, if I look at them, they look one is efficiency and the other one is cost optimization. In my head, they sound kind of similar thing. If you make things efficient, wouldn't you not make them cheaper?
But performance efficiency is also like in parts when we're talking about chaos engineering, performance is also like scalability.
Okay.
So it is like scaling to the load and making sure that you are correctly aligning your choices of architecture so that you are not running a multi-region Aurora database clusters for something that doesn't need that kind of resiliency or performance scalability. And where you can apply serverless services, and where you need to run something on EC2s or containers and what have you, that what makes sense from performance standpoint of view. So, and funny enough, I think that the cost is the last pillar, and I think that there's a like strong division there between the customers. Others are really focused on the cost, and they think that everything should be cheapest as possible. And then there's the other type of customers, and they couldn't care less about cost as long as it's like in reasonable bounds. So it's not millions of dollars, or if it's aligned with their business. So if you have $1 million business and you are spending 50,000 on infrastructure, maybe it's not a big of a deal. So you also need to understand the context there. But in reality, how it goes, it's like you spend more time in the pillars when beginning the discussion, and then you realize when going to the later pillars that okay, we discussed this already, that we actually got the answer for this specific question even if it wasn't specifically asked. So this is also part of my method, that why I choose not to like show kind of the tick boxes to the customer, because I like to also kind of keep things efficient, that I'm not like asking the same questions
over and over
multiple times. Yeah. But there was just a recent update, like I think like a little over a month ago, or roughly a month ago, these white papers were updated. And then during that time the questions were updated as well.
But the pillars stayed the same. That didn't change.
Pillars are the same, but the content is a little bit updated. So they removed some overlap between the pillars, and also some of the papers were not really outdated, but on the borderline of becoming outdated.
What is these white papers that you're talking about? Can you share with us what you mean?
Yeah, actually, it is here in the. I just so happen to have. So let's start from there. If you are not familiar with the framework and you only want to read one, there is this one compound white paper called AWS well-architecte framework, which includes information of all of the contents.
The links are in the description box.
Yes, and so the white papers include. Let me, if you can see this.
That's super tiny. Now.
Okay, to zoom that out. But anyway, there are five white papers of pillars, and then this one top-level white paper about the whole well-architected framework, and then you have a few white papers which are called lenses. So lenses is kind of an other vector on top of the well-architected framework. So if you
in a couple of weeks, we are talking with Heitor Lessa about the serverless lens on the framework.
Yeah, okay. But what is useful for the sake of this conversation is that there are things that are called lenses, and that provides kind of a extra insight if you are doing machine learning, if you're doing serverless, if you're doing IoT. Then there's financial and analytics.
They add lenses now and then when there is some good case for it.
Yes, not all of these are reflected in the actual well-architected tool as of yet, but the white papers are there. So if you are working in a context of one of these chosen technologies or technology stacks, then it makes sense to also take a look at the lens, because that includes additional details and additional information how to think of the architecture. But yeah, as said, if you only read one paper, it is this one, the AWS well-architecture framework, July 2020 version. But that is the only thing that I think you can nowadays download from AWS website. So, but if you previously downloaded an old version, I highly recommend getting the newer one.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about the process that you follow when you are doing these well-architected reviews, because, well, you said that you prepare usually some days a customer call, they want to have a well-architected review with you, and then you start preparing a couple of days before the review. You book one day for doing it. You might have 8 people, 10 people, 14 people there. But how the customer prepares for this? Because you prepare, do they need to prepare as well?
I usually recommend them, as I recommended now, the watchers of these to read at least the kind of the top level white paper, so that they know that where they are entering to, and then we do have like a preparation document which includes information and the contents and the structure of the day, so that people will know that where they are coming to and what to expect during it is a document that we call welcome package.
Okay.
So this has been like a hugely iterative process for us as well, after we became a company who's allowed to do this independently of AWS.
You need to be approved to do this.
Yes, so you need to be approved as a company and you need to be approved as an individual. So we do have few people who are like the well-architected leads or well-architected ambassadors inside Cybercom, and we do have a specific training path if someone wishes to become a well-architected practitioner inside Cybercom. But for sure, you need to be approved as a partner organization first, to be approved to the list of companies who are even able to do that. And
but can you do it, for example, if you are part of a big organization and you want to do it for your own organization, then it's fine, you can do it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's how it's you are able to like take the white papers, take the tool, utilize them in any way that you want. One of the main points is in doing a well-architected review with authorized partner is that there is a reward from AWS side that if you do the review and you commit to fixing certain number of issues based on the findings, then you are awarded $5,000 in AWS credits. So
wow.
that's kind of a carrot for the customer to do well-architected review. But it doesn't come as a given. You need to commit to the rules of the program. But that is, and when you are doing it with authorized partner, you also get kind of a official document that here are the findings, here is what the most important things that we would suggest that you do. So this is also being part of our own iterative process that we have been developing the templates and the documents, how we communicate and how we deliver those to the customer, where we think that we have done a relatively good job and we get the constant feedback from customers, that how clearly we communicate that what are the important things that they should take a look at next.
Yeah, so now you're ready, you come to the meeting virtual or in real person, and how they start for a review? Well, you mentioned that you want everybody to introduce themselves.
Yeah. So first I just like walk through the agenda, and then we agree and commit to the schedule so that everyone knows that what will be happening and at which time. And as I said, that the whole engagement is a time boxed effort. Yeah. So the time boxing applies also to inside the day. So I usually suggest that we do as a starting point, we do an even split on the pillars. So we spend roughly like 45 minutes to 1 hour for each pillar, discussing around that.
Can the customers choose which order they want the pillars, or you have a best practice, the one that you just show us?
If they would have very strong case why they would want to start with something else, that could be possible. It's not like locked down in that way that it's kind of an incompatible process if you're not doing it in certain order. And AWS does not specifically state anything about this, but as our process, we do it in a way that we do give customers a leeway to set kind of percentages for pillars if they wish to, but they need to stay at even 100% as the sum. So naturally it starts like 5 pillars, 20% each. If they want to, they can adjust that up or down, but no pillar can be lesser than 10%, and no pillar can be more than 30%. So that is kind of the ballpark that I am giving them. And I don't know if that would be even necessary, but that is just something that I kind of wanted to give the customers the freedom, because sometimes there is that okay, we want to make this like a security focused or something like that. Usually then I have an informed discussion with them, and then we decide that okay, that these other things are also very important to cover because they have implications in security as well.
Sure.
Like for example, in operational excellence, if your ways of working suck, you are going to be insecure regardless of how well your technical security has been implemented.
Yeah, but maybe if they're coming for the first time, they have this kind of pre-mental concept of what is important, and they want, we need to be the cheapest one. It's like, well, it just will happen if you have everything right, and if you do everything, you will have your cost under control.
Yeah.
So,
and cheap is also different than being cost conscious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's like sometimes they want to be cheap, but they are not even cost conscious, so they do not know that where the money goes.
Yeah,
but
that your AWS bill is small doesn't mean that you're not spending that money somewhere else. So
yeah. But coming back to the kind of the structure of the day, so that's where it starts. So we go through the agenda and schedule and agree that this is the way we want to do that. Then there's a round table that we will introduce that who we are and what is our role in regards of this workload. And then next what happens is that I ask someone to present the workload, that what is the business importance of this one, and what is the implementation, and if it has dependencies to any other internal or external systems. For example, if you're running e-commerce website, it makes sense to identify that there's integrations towards PayPal or credit card suppliers or what have you. So those interrelations are also, even if they are not in the scope of the review per se, it is important to understand that they exist so that you can like comment on those.
Yeah.
And then after
will you check, for example, things like GDPR, like to make sure that they are aligned with that kind of things, or how they store the private information for the customers? Is that also part of the review?
Yeah, and naturally that starts from like identifying that if this system handles private data and private data of like private consumer customers. And if the answer is no, or that they are just using some external system to integrate that, like getting IDs of customers, but are not handling like the real identities, then it's like more than enough. But if they answer that yes, naturally, then that kind of opens the scope of discussing that as well. But as said, that when talking about scoping, it is if we want to deep dive in certain subject, it is always away from some other things. And even if like 5.5 hours of working time seems like a lot, and people actually have like said that it might feel a little bit overwhelming about the amount of information and the number of questions that I'm pouring on top of them. So it can be like a little bit exhaustive, but it is still a relatively short time to trying to find out a lot of things when starting from basically zero understanding of their architecture when entering the room.
Yeah, that's quite crazy.
Yeah. But after that, then it's like going through the pillars in order. Usually now when doing this in remote setting, I've done it in a way that 2 hours working, then 1 hour lunch break, everyone be able to catch up on their emails and what have you. Then 1.5 hours working on 2 pillars, half an hour coffee break, and 1.5 hours working on 2 pillars, and then some last words and conclusion, and like asking the kind of the general temperature of the room, that how they felt about the contents, and closing up and remarks. And one thing that I really communicate as that where I want to be strict as this, I expect everyone to be focused during the day. So
I think virtually is very hard because people have their emails, they have their other things, their phone.
But people also get caught that if I'm asking a question and they are not, they didn't even hear the question, they maybe hear their name. They're like, if you don't, there's like a kind of thing that if you want to kind of spare them that embarrassment, this is like maybe a like more like meeting technique, online meeting technique, but you can like mention them by name, like waking them up by pinging them and then asking the question, rather than the other way around, that first asking a question and then, well, what do you think, Marcia, about this?
That's
because
horrible.
because then you are like trying to rewind your input buffer, that what did he ask, what was the question. But yeah, it is certainly the thing that still happens, but this is something that I'm trying to be very clear about communicating, that I expect everyone's attention during the session, and it's for their benefit, not mine.
Exactly. So then you run through all the pillars. I imagine that there is a lot of presentations from everybody and you ask a lot of questions about everything. And how the day ends? You have a list of findings already, or you need to sit down and pre-process everything? Or
to some part, I actually do it in a little bit of free flow. So I just start from somewhere, and based on what they answer, I kind of start approaching the issue from different angles. And sometimes I ask some proof that, okay, can you show me this dashboard? How does it work? And then I just like try to gather as much signals as possible to trying to figure out that what is here worth knowing, or what is here like worth identifying, that if this is an issue or not. Some questions naturally are the kind of that are easy to answer, like even yes or no answers, and sometimes the answers are trivial, that this is how we do it. But in some cases the answers are the questions nor the answers are not that trivial. So it is kind of more like a free-flowing discussion, trying to understand what the train of thought has been with the customer when they have been designing this. And also one important aspect is to understand kind of the chemistries and the interrelations of the people, that how does this organization work? Do they understand each other's responsibilities? Do they even understand their own responsibilities?
Like company therapy.
Yeah, kind of, because there are like sometimes you can find these huge blind spots between like responsibilities that everyone took for granted, that someone else is taking care of this specific responsibility, and then everyone just has kind of blank stare at, okay, I thought that you were handling this part. And like, despite of us being on agile and DevOps era of IT, still many of the companies work in a way that where you do have like separate operational department who is responsible in like managing and running the workloads, and that is like a huge gap where it's very easy to lose a lot of details.
Yeah. And people are like, it's not my problem. The ops team will handle it.
Yeah. And I feel that the well-architected reviews are like a good occasion also for bridge building between different personas and different roles and different parts of organization.
And I think having a neutral person, it's kind of like important, because if maybe they have these leadership offsites now and then, but maybe they start fighting or just trying to like, oh, la, 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 like, because I have seen that in many organizations, like people are, when the whole leaders of different parts of the organization get together to discuss things, they don't get to much agreement, but then if you have a neutral person there that is kind of moderating the talk and like, okay, this is maybe easier for them to find ways of communicating.
Yeah, I do believe that when doing the review, kind of whether it's remote or where it's on site, it should be kind of a safe room for anyone to speak up. I don't necessarily like promote it that using those words, but essentially that is like what it should be. And like from if you have ever being part of major incident review, that kind of doing this like blameless post-mortem, I think that the tone should be more or less the same. Excellent. That it should be easy for people to admit that something is unoptimal without being blamed on the spot, that why did you screw this up or
but I think this example of running this type of reviews also helps to improve maybe the person's processes at the end, because if you see how one process can run without like this review, without blaming, without like pointing fingers, without things like that, then maybe you can take the same into smaller processes inside your organization and create a similar community if the company doesn't have that safe space. So
yeah, and I've been pleasantly surprised about the professionality of all of the companies and all of the teams that I've had the pleasure to work with, and that also counting in the factor that sometimes the development team could be considered of coming from a company that is like a straight competitor of my employer. So it is like I really respect the professionality of the people that I've had the pleasure to work with.
Yeah, well, I think at least everybody wants to improve and do their job better. So I think this review, as you said, is for them. So I think it's an opportunity. If you get the chance to get one of these done in your organization, I think it's a great starting point to improve everything. So I think the last bit is like you were saying that there are these findings that you create. It's like a list of some things, like actions that they need to take, or
so if you are using the well-architected tool that based on the kind of tick boxes that you tick or left unticked, it will give you kind of on a general level some findings that are not specific to the workload. But part of our specific process is to give like really specific on-point advice that this is actually the thing that you should consider in improving. We do it in a way that we, depending on the workload and how the review went, I usually give a maximum of dozen specific advice. I feel that giving out more, even if sometimes you could like make a really long list of small findings, but I tend to kind of limit that to, let's say, around dozen most important ones, and I put some metadata to those that I use the labels of the pillars. So if some finding is spanning multiple pillars, for example, operational excellence and security is quite common combination, that I will have a finding and also a short remediation suggestion that this is how I would approach the issue. For example, very, very very simple example that if customer has a significant workload but is running test, dev, and production in the same AWS account, my advice would be that consider splitting at the minimum the production role to be on a segregated account with limiting only read-only access to the absolute minimum of persons that require the access to the account. So that would be, depending on, that could be a medium or critical finding and spanning operational excellence and security. So that is like a one example. And like talking about criticality, when our well-architected practitioners do reports, they use 3-level system where we use low, medium, and critical findings. So the metadata is the pillars and the criticality. That's what we've stuck with so far. We haven't found the use to make it more complicated, but this is just something to kind of give an idea that look at these color-coded labels, then you understand.
Start with the red one.
Yeah. The red criticals are red ones. So if you just want to quickly find that which are the red ones, it is easy for you to find them in the report. So in the report, I will usually it is consisting of like a general summary that just listing out people who were attending, their roles, what the workload with my own 3 words is. I always send out also the initial version of the report to like the workload owner, that please fact check that I got this right, but I still want to write it in my own words, because then they might also understand that were they able to explain the workload in words that made sense to me. So so general information, people attending, so on, and some background of the program terms if they want to get the remediation credits. Then I do write a general summary of what I felt that was important, and then I write pillar specific passages, which are like maybe from 2 to 5 chapters long, depending on the gravity and the number of findings that I had. And then there's the final major chapter, which includes, let's say, from 8 to 13, 14 different remediation points or findings and the remediation suggestions. And this is kind of the final package that we will deliver to the customer, which is actually in addition to what you get from the well-architected tool. So
and then, for example, if this customer comes back in 1 year, will you start checking if they remediated what it was asked, or you will start again from fresh, clear slate? Nothing happened. We don't know each other.
Yeah, as said, I think that this is an iterative approach. So actually, the first thing, if there wasn't a review already for that specific customer, sometimes it happens that we go and review a system that was previously reviewed, for example, by an SA from AWS. So if we have the possibility to get that report, then we use that as basis. But if not, then we just need to start somewhere. And even though like the first white papers of well-architected are already relatively old in IT world, but still kind of how these reviews are conducted, it was very different a few years ago when AWS was only delivering these reviews and not anyone else. And it has the process has developed from AWS side hugely during the last few years, as have for us personally our internal process as well. So it might be that something that was done a year ago or 2 years ago doesn't resemble that much what it is today. So you need to take that old report at face value that okay, we will take away what we can, but then we start with the new white papers and the new process.
Yeah, because that happens a lot in the cloud. Things change quite often, so
Yeah,
but I think this is great summary of the whole process, and maybe somebody is interested in checking what are the partners that are close to them doing these reviews, or they might want to start it in their own company. But I imagine that to run this well-architected, you need to have quite a lot of experience in in the cloud, and running projects is not that something you can do without experience.
And like the formal requirement for running well-architected review from AWS side for you to become a practitioner is to have SA Pro certificate.
Oh.
So that you need to have that. Otherwise, it's something that you can't, like, officially you can't do. As you said, if you want to run this internally for your own workload, fine. It doesn't require anything for you to use the tool and read the white papers. That is even better if you do. It makes a whole lot of sense if you're interested in. But if you want to have like someone from the outside to come, then you know that they are holding an SA Pro certificate if they are officially allowed to do this for external companies. That's kind of the bar that AWS has set.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have at least a lot of knowledge in running cloud workloads to be able to do this, because the level of understanding that you have when you are 6 hours with the customer that you didn't know anything, and then you end up the meeting and understood the whole process and find things that they need to fix. It just requires, I think, a lot of expertise. So
and like a single implementation of a review, it becomes kind of a reflection of the person running the workshop. So we have a bunch of people who are entitled to running these workshops right now, which we have internally trained. And I always say to them that play to your strengths, that be good at where you are good at. So, and this also applies for us selecting a person to do a well-architected review, so that if a customer has, for example, an IoT workload, maybe we send someone who understands IoT and not something else. So it is like the whole AWS technology stack is so huge that nobody can be the expert in everything. But in the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like being SA Pro certified certainly gives you an idea on the baseline that how things should be set up, and then also like running these reviews teaches you what things are important and what are lesser important, and like then you become more and more fluent in running the workshop. So
like everything you learn with experience. So the more you do it, the better you will do it, and the more your company does it. Like Cybercom have been learning from you and other people in the company running these workshops. So I think it's always a matter of experience. But I think, I don't know, do you want to add anything else? But I think we have a lot of information already.
Yeah, I think that we have like touched this subject on so many sides, but
I was very curious about it, so it was great.
If people are interested, like for example, hearing this in like some community talk, like in AWS Nordic meetup or something like that, just like drop me a line and we'll figure it out. This is certainly a topic that I can like discuss if this is of interest.
Maybe not only Nordic level, but now we are in this world that everything is online. So even if they are coming from somewhere else, they can reach to you and ask you if you want to participate. I will leave all your contact details in the description box, and as well the links to Cybercom and the papers and everything we talked today, because maybe there is a lot of people interested in reading more about this and learning more. But thank you, Rolf, for your time. It was great that you spent an hour with us today teaching us about well-architected. And have a great day.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This was the episode for today. I hope you like it. If you did, give a big thumbs up. Thumbs ups really help me to grow my channel, but more sharing and commenting and subscribing to the channel. If you would like me to invite someone to the series of interviews, I still have a couple slots left in my fall planning, so please let me know in the comment box below or send me a message. In the description box of this episode, you can find all the links that we mentioned during the chat, as well as Rolf's points of contact. And I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao, ciao!